play game.
This is Elise with an update on the ongoing Inessa Armand translation project. We now have 37 of the 38 extant essays and speeches by Inessa Armand translated into English for the first time. And we are just short of the halfway mark on the fundraising progress as well. This enrichment of the English language Marxist canon has only been possible with your support, and it's been a real lifeline for me. So anyone who would like to support this project can find links in the description for how to do so, and everybody who has already supported it has my sincerest thanks.
Perfect. Okay, 3 of 4.
El hospital
還元一級の先というのは本当に誰も知らない字ばっかりでしょうね。私は
Okay, we've leveled up and it is time to pick another language. Morfar är tröttare än vanligt. Maten är färdig. And let's see what we're doing when we get back. Greek. We're doing Greek when we get back. Ben neredeyse her gün okula giderim. Fun fact. Turkish. Hello, Shakespeare. How you doing? Fun fact, in Spanish, the word for bishop in chess is alfil. And that actually comes from Arabic. Fil. The same word fil as this. Meaning elephant, because the bishop traditionally was to represent elephant units somehow. Similarly, in Russian, the word for bishop is squab, and that also means elephant.
This is Elise with an update on the ongoing Inessa Armand translation project. We now have 37 of the 38 extant essays and speeches by Inessa Armand translated into English for the first time. And we are just short of the halfway mark on the fundraising progress as well. This enrichment of the English language Marxist canon has only been possible with your support, and it's been a real lifeline for me. So anyone who would like to support this project can find links in the description for how to do so, and everybody who has already supported it has my sincerest thanks.
ça, ça, c'est ça, ça, que c'est ça, non ça, c'est ça, sol chi sa che nulla sa, ne sa più di chi ne sa. Ecco.
Bonjour et bienvenue à Hyper Polyglotting avec Élise. Moi c'est Élise, traductrice, éditrice et écrivain avec 20 ans de travail. Et ça c'est la transmission en direct ou en jeu des jeux, surtout GeoGuessr en dernier temps. Et parle des langues, de la linguistique, de l'acquisition des langues.
10-159. Haven't made a huge dent in it, but we're getting there. Okay, gonna do some Chinese now. Night.
Hello and welcome to Hyperpolyglotting with Elise. I'm Elise, translator, writer, and editor with 20 working languages, and this is the stream where we're going to play some GeoGuessr, and we're going to look at some of what YouTube, language learning YouTube has to offer. Some of the good stuff and perhaps some of the not so great stuff. So why don't we get stuck in? Once I get my windows where I need them. There we go. Okay, I've been doing daily challenges to start out for a while. I think I'm going to continue that habit. Even though I do them far from daily, so they're more like twice weekly challenges. Okay, that looks like a European number plate format. And, okay, the markings on the street make me think Britain. 70. That sounds like miles per hour, so yeah. Britain or the 6 counties is my immediate thought. Pretty area, very nice. Very green. Yeah, it looks like we've got a town coming up. Wait, no, 800 meters? Okay, so maybe that's kilometers an hour. Don't think I've ever seen a 70 kmh sign before. Okay, so maybe Ireland then. Well, we'll see. Okay, the pavements. No. No, I was completely wrong there. That is not Britain. That is not Ireland. That is Estonian that we're looking at. Getting more Estonian all of a sudden. Okay. So Estonia has street markings not all that different to what you see in Britain or Ireland. These dashed lines on the sides. Are very... I don't think I've ever noticed them outside of Britain and Ireland. But apparently they've got them in Estonia. Who knew? Well, I guess Estonians knew. So, we are in country-ass Estonia. And that, I don't know much at all about Estonia. We got Estonia last week once. That took a while to find something. Okay, yeah, that's right. We don't have that kind of time, so there we go. 4639. I forgot that this is a time control. I never play with a time control. Yeah, so, okay. This is immediately giving Russia. Or Ukraine, possibly. This less so. Need some signs. A stop sign would immediately rule out Russia and I think Ukraine as well. Russia has very distinctive stop signs. Drva za ogrev. Okay. Tova je Bulgaria. 4684. Okay, we got desert, we got brush, we got cactus. We got nothing that's very clear to me. How's everybody doing, chat? Having a very dreary, drizzly sort of day over here. Okay, we have tankers. Not very helpful tankers. They don't actually say anything on them. Suministro de agua potable. Okay, Spanish-speaking place with a desert. Doesn't look like Chile. Cactuses make me think Mexico. Fucking hell, it was... Oh, it was not even close. I didn't realize there was a desert area in Colombia. Oh, there you go. That was Colombia. ¿Quién diría? Okay. Very orange place here. I feel like this might be South America again, but it's really hard to say, especially this lighting. Everything is in silhouette. Okay, we got buildings coming up. Yeah, okay. Southern Africa, maybe? It has sort of a semi-desert feel. It doesn't feel like West Africa. Okay, we gotta get a little bit closer to that sign. And it is too blurry. Damn it. We find a sign and it's illegible. I mean, it looks like Latin alphabet, but that's about all I can get out of it. It's just too blurry. And the trouble is, Latin alphabet is very widespread in Africa, and I'm pretty sure this is Africa. Neto Laundry and Dry Cleaning. Kiki Hair. Oh hell, it is Nigeria. Okay, I did not entirely realize there was a semi-desert climate in Nigeria. Good man. Okay, no need to mess around too much. This is either Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan. It's Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, surprise deserts all over the place. 4215. Okay, not terrible. I am in the top 43%. Neat. Classic maps, and let's do some world. How you doing, Hogsnout? Okay. This could be Latin America. This could be Precaución. Gasoducto. Okay, so it is someplace Spanish speaking. And there are natural gas lines. Actual natural gas mains. Which kind of rules out Chile. What flag is that? Is that Uruguay? Yeah, that's Uruguay. Gerencia, región litoral. Sulfato de aluminio. Okay, I think we are in Uruguay. I believe that was an Uruguayan flag. Okay, so cubing out. Toscanini, la máxima expresión del vino. A ver, well. So, someplace rural in Uruguay is what I've got so far. Or, I don't know, suburban, exurban, something like that. Rosario. What is it? Río Rosario. Esquina Tuerca. El Buda alegre, the happy Buddha. Contipan 3. En francés, ouais. Sevicol. Calle Memoria, Parque Durieux, Encuentros Mágicos, Paseo Romántico. Pero ¿dónde nos encontramos? Bienvenidos a Rosario. Esto no puede ser Rosario de Argentina. Fray Bento, tránsito pesado. Rústica, paseo romántico, Tata Rosario. Is this it? Let me see if we got this Giratuerca, o como se llamaba la hora. Paysandú, instrucciones del año 13. Atanasio Lapido. Not entirely convinced because I'm not seeing that street.
ruta 1, o sea, aquí se cruza más o menos esas dos. Ah, sí. Bueno. Yeah, I think this must be it. Okay. Going with it. Got it. 49.97. Good start. Okay. Rural area. Feels like a warm climate. We have a sign. I've unfortunately never heard of it. Have you been reading it already, or did you just find it? Okay, I think this looks like Thai. It is Thai. 4102. Not my best score, but Thailand is hard. Okay. Canada, possibly. Oh, well, what sort of ideas? I would definitely be interested in hearing them. I haven't heard of the author and I haven't heard of the book, but I might have thoughts on the ideas. Okay, these barrels are weird looking. Peel Police. Okay, we're in Canada. Don't think I've ever seen barrels that look like that before. Okay, so those are Canadian barrels. Neat. Kennedy Road. Beauvair Drive. Okay. So, Anglo-Canada. That does not narrow things down greatly. But a main road. Yeah. I mean, further confirmation. That is a Canadian speed limit sign. Just go northwest on it this way. We're on the right side of the road. I mean, I guess the first thing to check is, could this be a Toronto suburb? There are certainly a lot of them. Is there a Toronto suburb called Peel? Just because it's just one of the major population concentrations in Canada. So not a horrible idea to just see whether maybe it turns up. But I'm not seeing it.
I haven't really looked too carefully, but that indicates we need to be looking for more options. This will probably get me to some sort of a major highway or something. Notre Dame Secondary School. .905 area code, that means nothing to me. I mean, other than, apparently now I know it's in Canada. That in itself isn't a bad thing to know. Okay. I mean, there is definitely a place for, like, spaced repetition within an overall framework, but I think it sounds like, and I'm just going based on your summary there, so I could be totally wrong there. He's treating language learning like a special case of memorizing things. Of, like, reading things and just remembering them, or hearing them and remembering them. And that's really not how language acquisition works. I mean, as I said, I don't know if that's, in fact, his thinking, but India Bazaar. Heart Lake Medical Center. See, the fundamental ingredient to language acquisition, Sandalwood Parkway East, Loafers Lake Recreation Center. Okay. Still not really helping. Humber University. Brampton. Is that in Alberta, maybe? I mean, it looks, one way or another, like it is probably a suburb of some major metropolitan area. And in that sense, it's probably not a bad idea to look around and see if we find one that fits. Brampton, Peterborough, Kingston, Yarker, Brampton, Peel Village. I was right all along. Kennedy Road, there we go. Ooh. Okay, it's by the 410-407 interchange. Yeah, that's the thing, because it's not. A language isn't just a collection of words and structures, it is an entire system. There's Peel Village. Okay, so Kennedy. $49.83. Yeah, I mean, in fact, one of the interesting results of a lot of language acquisition research has been that actually the way that people acquire grammar has absolutely nothing to do with like memorizing it. It's not a skill-based thing. Reading for pleasure seems to be the key ingredient in acquiring good grammar in one's target language. Okay, I mean, this feels kind of European. Just vaguely. Very leafy. Van Oostadlaan, Schilder. Okay, we are in someplace Dutch or Flemish speaking. It does narrow things down. Burgemeester Elsalan. Netherlands or Belgium. Yellow number plates were in the Netherlands. Maar we moeten alleen maar uitvinden waar we precies zijn. Westhof, Vredeburg. Ja, ik weet niet. Yeah, I mean, to a great extent, what we're doing, we're kind of always acquiring bits of a language. We're always sort of, even languages we know really, really well, we're always finding new things out about them the more we're exposed to them. Schoolzone, okay. Nou is het koud. Nou is het koud. Koud. Strandwal Festival. Arts en zorg. Huisarts en praktijk. Oud Rijswijk. Rijswijk. Ogenblikje. Rijswijk. Dat ken ik. Noordwijk, Zaandam, Nijkerk, Culemborg, de Rijswijk. Is het misschien een gedeelte van Amsterdam? Gesloten Oostdorp, Land van Spartaan, de Pijp, Zeeburg, Vensterpolder, Kronenburg, Groenelaan, Oosteinde, Oranjewijk. I have heard of this place, and now I'm having trouble placing it. Thing about comprehensible input, a lot of people like act like that. I mean, especially people who are trying to refute the theory around it, will act like that is in itself a method. But it's not. It's an ingredient that is central to any approach that is going to work. Ik heb iets meer nodig. Oud Rijswijk. Vredebrug, Westhof. Okay, let's see. Maybe we'll get some other nearby place names. Oh no, all of a sudden it's snowing. Now it's not again. Pensioen. Klingendal. Yeah, okay. Erasmusweg, Megastores, Centrumring. Ik weet niet. Tandartspraktijk, het is niet bereikbaar niet. Westzaan. Oh, hang on. What did that say? Omleiding. It doesn't help me because it's just street names. If I had if all I needed were street names, I would be in a much better position here. My difficulty comes from the fact that I'm not actually sure where in the country I am. I know I've heard of Rijswijk. Ah, Rijswijk! There we go. 49.92, not bad. Okay. That was the wrong way to go. That's a dead end. Okay. Let's see what... Remelair. This could be Australia. These houses could definitely fit in with Australia. Street signs keep left, so we're left side driving. Kingston Road, Beenleigh, Gold Coast. We are in Queensland. Not far from Brizzy. Beenleigh. Righto, 94 and 95. Kingston Road. If you're just joining us, we are someplace not far from Beenleigh by the Gold Coast in Queensland. This is the stream where I play some GeoGuessr and then look at some of the best and worst of language YouTube. Pinelands. Okay. So Beenleigh and the Gulf Coast are due east of us. Wait, Kingston Road. So we are west. Probably not far then from Kingston. Just by Logan Lee. I feel like I just had that a second ago. Ah, there we are. So around here someplace. 49.93. Not bad. $24,067. Not upgrading my subscription right now. That would require money. Okay, before we go on to our next game, I wanted to show you something I'm currently working on. Because I'm working on these videos. I've got a new one that is actually I'm planning on releasing it on Sunday. But what I'm doing is using authentic materials to learn various languages. So I was inspired by Talk Arabic Today, who does this with Arabic, as you might be unsurprised to hear. What he does is he takes these videos, like just short clips from authentic materials, often from like the news or just television or something like that. And he shows the clip once, then does what I like to call priming. He just calls it vocabulary, which is to say, introducing key words that people might not know that are relevant to, to understanding the clip. And then you get the clip again, but with Arabic and English subtitles. And it strikes me as a very good way to sort of ease people into authentic materials, because one of the ways to engage with comprehensible input, one of the reasons that it really helps is the bits that you do understand actually help you make sense out of the bits you don't understand. So that is a thing that I'm working on right now. I'm going to show you the most recent one, just sort of off in a corner. This is Learning Spanish with Miguel Enriquez. And I'm going to drop the links to these two in chat. I'm creating playlists for each of the languages I've made videos like this for. And this is something I'm really trying to make happen. So if people share this in places where they think there might be interest, I would really appreciate it. Because the algorithm kind of hates small creators. I'm trying to do this, I'm doing this in different languages to sort of gauge where there's interest. Like, the next one's going to actually be Japanese. But I'm going to just kind of keep on doing that, little by little, building up a collection of these sorts of videos. I'm thinking I might do an entire, course like that as well. Like, create that. But in the meantime, the more people actually... Here's the first one that I did. This is learning French with a creator by the name of Cassandre. So, yeah. So I'm going to just show you what one of these looks like. So at the moment, there hasn't been it's hard to actually get views on things when you're not a very large creator on YouTube, unless you sort of circumvent the algorithm by, getting people to share it in other places. So this is the Spanish one. This is Spanish with Miguel Enriquez. And
Hello,
you've got the link in chat.
welcome to Hyperpolyglotting with Elise. This is the second in a new series of videos I'm doing, inspired by Talk Arabic Today. Link in description for anyone trying to learn Arabic. What Talk Arabic Today does is a take on something I'm constantly banging on about on stream: comprehensible input. He takes authentic materials with added Arabic subtitles and uses them to help people learn Arabic, adding a list of words from the video that people might need explained. This is what I call priming.
And, see, I mean, the cool thing about this, and the reason I think it's a really good approach, is precisely because it uses materials people might be interested in, like often materials that you wouldn't necessarily get in sort of a language learning space, because a lot of the time the materials are very neutral, often kind of boring, middle of the road kind of stuff. And what I've decided to do, see, I'm not trying to, attract everybody in the world who's trying to learn, Spanish or Japanese or whatever to this channel. I mean, if they show up, that's neat, but in terms of actually being able to sort of make a living doing language-related content in addition to my translating work, which it's been a few bad years for the entire profession. What I'm looking for, I'm doing videos on stuff that using clips from stuff that I actually care about, on the theory that probably there are other people who are learning languages and also care about that stuff. And so I'm trying to sort of reach out to them. I figure I'm probably not the only one who would be interested in this sort of content, and this is a way to use it in a language learning context. So that's what...
With the help of the newly explicated words, he then shows the video again with subs in Arabic and English. So that's what we're going to do today, except we're going to do it with Spanish. Here is a clip from one of the most memorable speeches of Miguel Enríquez Espinosa, co-founder and leader of the Movimiento de Izquierda Revolucionaria, MIR, or Revolutionary Left Movement in Chile. In this section of the speech, he's talking about a coup attempt that had taken place a few weeks earlier, on the 29th of June 1973.
The gradual write-on plugin didn't quite do what I needed it to do there. I seem to have forgotten to take out a keyframe.
In which an armored regiment attacked La Moneda, the Chilean presidential palace, what really happened, and how the Chilean working class responded. First, we'll listen to the whole thing in Spanish. Then, we'll go over some words that will help you understand what he's saying. After that, we'll listen to the whole thing again with subtitles in both English and Spanish.
So here we go. Okay, let me adjust the chat window because that seems to be... There we go.
El Partido Nacional que asaltó la moneda utilizando tanques que fueron comprados con el trabajo de obreros y campesinos. Lo que aquí fue mancillado no fue la institucionalidad ni el honor de algunos oficiales, sino el honor del pueblo y la vida de más de 2 decenas de soldados y trabajadores.
So you've got these subs, and I put these pauses in. He doesn't pause this long in the actual speech, but I figured it gives people a little bit more time to sort of process it.
Todo el que dispara contra el pueblo será marcado históricamente como asesino del pueblo, tenga o no tenga uniforme. Aplastado el intento golpista por las Fuerzas Armadas, algunos oficiales honestos, suboficiales y carabineros, y por el inmediato cerco que los trabajadores tendieron alrededor de Santiago, la clase obrera, consciente que el problema no estaba resuelto, continuó y profundizó su contraofensiva. Ocuparon centenares de fábricas y puntos, se controlaron las poblaciones, incorporaron los estudiantes y se multiplicaron y fortalecieron los comandos comunales. Tomó impulso la organización de defensa de los trabajadores y se desarrolló y fortaleció el poder popular.
Our first expression is tratarse de. This is one you hear a lot in Spanish. It can mean it is, or it is about, or to be about. It's a way of making clear what the actual topic is. In the phrase, de lo que se trata es de, it can be used to introduce a topic. For example, de lo que se trata es del pebre con sabor a benzina que nos sirvieron. The issue here is the petrol-flavored beverage sauce you served us. The next word is mancillar, which is related to the word manchar, for to stain. Mancillar is to taint or besmirch.
I'm also experimenting with format. If you look at the Cassandre one, the French one, which is the only other one of these I've done so far, you'll notice I did the format a little bit differently. And so I'm trying out different things in each of them and to see just which stuff really kind of resonates. And so that I can kind of focus in on that. So, like, really, the more people who might be interested in it see the stuff, the better.
Next, we have la institucionalidad, which refers to institutions in the broadest possible sense, the whole institutional structure.
If you're just joining, I'm just taking a look at one of a series of videos I've started creating where we're learning languages from authentic materials.
Next is aplastar, which is to smash or to crush. The next one we have is suboficial, which is a non-commissioned officer or NCO. In Chile, it is not only a general category of military personnel, it's also a rank in its own right, roughly equal to a platoon sergeant in the US. Carabineros are the Chilean military police. There is no direct English translation because the Carabineros in Chile are organized as a military body, but carry out civilian policing functions. They are policified military rather than militarized police. Un cerco is a fence or a barrier around something. Tender un cerco is to set up such a barrier. It can also be used in a more metaphorical sense for what we might in English call a dragnet. Next, we have profundizar, which comes from profundo, or deep. It means to deepen or intensify something. Población usually means population, but in Chile it also refers to neighborhoods that started out as encampments formed by landless peasants who came to the cities in the mid to late 20th century in search of better work and living conditions. Colloquially, they're also often called poblas. Resolver is to resolve or solve something. Here it appears in the form resuelto. Desarrollar is to develop something. When it refers to something developing on its own, it becomes desarrollarse. Okay, now let's go back and have a listen to the full thing with English and Spanish subtitles.
That keyframe issue again.
And if you find you're not getting all of it the first time, which is not entirely unlikely, really, it takes some getting used to, then just listen to it over and over again.
De lo que se trata es del grupo armado del Partido Nacional que asaltó la moneda utilizando tanques que fueron comprados con el trabajo de obreros y campesinos.
My head was in the way of the subs.
Lo que aquí fue mancillado no fue la institucionalidad ni el honor de algunos oficiales, sino el honor del pueblo y la vida de más de 2 decenas de soldados y trabajadores. Todo el que dispara contra el pueblo será marcado históricamente como asesino del pueblo, tenga o no tenga uniforme. Aplastado el intento golpista por las Fuerzas Armadas, algunos oficiales honestos, suboficiales y carabineros, y por el inmediato cerco que los trabajadores tendieron alrededor de Santiago, la clase obrera, consciente que el problema no estaba resuelto, continuó y profundizó su contraofensiva. Ocuparon centenares de fábricas y puntos, se controlaron las poblaciones, incorporaron los estudiantes y se multiplicaron y fortalecieron los comandos comunales. Tomó impulso la organización de defensa de los trabajadores y se desarrolló y fortaleció el poder popular.
So that's it for today. As I said, you'll find the link to the full video in the description. If you find that there were bits you didn't get, just listen to it over and over. The more you watch and listen to content in your target language, the more it'll begin to click in your head. And you'll find yourself understanding more and more. If you found this useful and want to see more of this kind of thing, let me know in the comments. Also, please like and subscribe and tell your friends. If you'd like to support this channel and my other projects, please consider joining my Patreon or making a one-off donation. Links in description. Ciao!
Okay, so that's one of these videos. And I'm going to be back in just a few minutes. I'm going to take a quick bio break.
Hi, and welcome to Hyperpolyglotting with Elise. I am Elise, translator, editor, and writer with 20 working languages, and this is where we talk about languages and language learning and all sorts of other stuff, and we play games.
This is Elise with an update on the ongoing Inessa Armand translation project. We now have 37 of the 38 extant essays and speeches by Inessa Armand translated into English for the first time. And we are just short of the halfway mark on the fundraising progress as well. This enrichment of the English language Marxist canon has only been possible with your support, and it's been a real lifeline for me. So anyone who would like to support this project can find links in the description for how to do so, and everybody who has already supported it has my sincerest thanks.
Perfect. Okay, 3 of 4.
El hospital
還元一級の先というのは、本当に誰も知らない字ばっかりでしょうね。私は
Okay, we've leveled up and it is time to pick another language. Morfar är tröttare än vanligt. Maten är färdig. And let's see what we're doing when we get back. Greek. We're doing Greek when we get back. Ben neredeyse her gün okula giderim. Fun fact. Turkish. Hello, Shakespeare. How you doing? Fun fact, in Spanish, the word for bishop in chess is alfil. And that actually comes from Arabic. Fil. The same word fil as this. Meaning elephant, because the bishop traditionally was to represent elephant units somehow. Similarly, in Russian, the word for bishop is squab, and that also means elephant.
This is Elise with an update on the ongoing Inessa Armand translation project. We now have 37 of the 38 extant essays and speeches by Inessa Armand translated into English for the first time. And we are just short of the halfway mark on the fundraising progress as well. This enrichment of the English language Marxist canon has only been possible with your support, and it's been a real lifeline for me. So anyone who would like to support this project can find links in the description for how to do so, and everybody who has already supported it has my sincerest thanks.
Sa Ah, c'est ça, che se sa non sa se sa, sol chi sa che nulla sa, ne sa più di chi ne sa. Ecco.
Bonjour et bienvenue à Hyperpolyglotting avec Élise. Moi, c'est Élise, traductrice, éditrice et écrivain avec 20 ans de travail. Et ça, c'est la transmission en direct ou en jeu des jeux, surtout GeoGuessr en dernier temps. Et parle des langues, de la linguistique et de l'acquisition des langues.
10-159. Haven't made a huge dent in it, but we're getting there. Okay, gonna do some Chinese now. Night. Night. Come on. Bien. Yo. 5. Ducks are drinking wine. Barbaz, okay, Barbaz is duck. Okay, I have now leveled up. Let's see what the XP situation is now. 10,340 out of 12,500. And as always, viewers can choose my next language for me just with a follow and a $5 to my Patreon.
Sotto le frasche del capanno 4 gatti grossi stanno. Sotto 4 grossi sassi, 4 grossi e grassi gatti. Un généreux déjeuner régénéré des généraux dégénérés. Un généreux déjeuner régénéré des généraux dégénérés. Facile. Sì, ecco, la gente... è la cosa che mi dice la gente, sempre che scoprisce che quante lingue parlo. Io sempre avevo l'impressione, diciamo, di che non era così, non era tan così, ma poi dopo di aver visto qualche poliglota in YouTube, una delle cose che avevo scoperte era giustamente che la metodologia usata da quella gente poliglota che non avevo mai conosciuta prima, era più o meno la stessa metodologia che usavo io.
I buy a computer or what? And here's another example. I like to point these out. For this word for or, but sounds vaguely like Hogun and the hook in Hogun in Korean or Waku in Japanese, and that means it is the exact same kind of character.
Okay, let me.
Un chasseur, sa son chassé, ses chassés sont son chien de chasse.
Der dicke Dach.
Okay, der dicke Dachdecker deckt dir dein Dach, drum dank dem dicken Dachdecker, dass der dicke Dachdecker dir dein Dach deckt.
Hola y bienvenidos al directo de Hyperpolyglotting with Elise. Yo soy Elisa, traductora, escritora, editora y comunicadora social con más de 20 idiomas de trabajo. Y aquí vamos a estar jugando videojuegos, sobre todo GeoGuessr, y hablando de...
Okay, and I'm back. Oh, that's good to hear, Hogsnout. Yeah, I mean, I think that when you actually take content that has some kind of a point of view, it's more interesting. It's potentially more compelling. And one of the aspects of the work that's been done on language acquisition and input is that the more compelling the material is to the person learning, the more likely they are to actually derive some sort of a benefit from it. So, I mean, the thing with this is you watch this stuff over and over again, you get used to the sound of it, you get used to the words, you start to get a sense of the flow of it.
even if you're not understanding much at all, that is useful, because getting used to how it sounds and how it flows and how the syllables kind of come together is useful. Like, I was watching, one of the harder languages I've ever worked on, that I'm still working on and off, is Georgian. And I found some, like, cookery videos in Georgian, this TV show called Gurmania on Georgian State TV from a few years ago. And I didn't understand, like, anything, really. But gradually, as I was listening to it, I got better at understanding where the boundaries between words were, how it was flowing and stuff like that. And gradually I started to also make sense out of how, what they were talking about. Because, of course, the nice thing about how-to videos, which is another thing that I think is really kind of underrated as input for language learning, is if they're done well, they're showing you the thing that they're doing at the same time as they're doing the thing that they're doing and talking about it. So, and that means that you're getting context with the words that helps you make sense out of the ones you don't necessarily automatically know, that you don't already know, and that is all. It all comes together. It's very much, and so yeah. So, and the way I come to see, a lot of people these days, comprehensible input is, it is a thing. It is a buzzword and stuff like that. Where the way I came to it was completely unrelated to that. Hey, Ata. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I had not heard of comprehensible input or Stephen Krashen, who's one of the main researchers working on this, until just a couple of years ago. But I had already sort of gravitated to that sort of approach, an approach focus that is very much input-based, on my own, just because I had been teaching myself languages since childhood, and getting a sense for what was actually helping me and what wasn't helping me. And what I started to find was that the things that were really helping were very much, what you would call comprehensible input-based approaches. Like, reading translated editions of books I know well. Because you already have sort of a comprehensibility bonus if you already know what's going on in the story, if you already know what the book is about and everything, and you can sort of focus on what's, what people are saying, then, or how they're saying it, rather, then that actually helps it click in your head. So I had already sort of, when I started to hear about this, when I really hadn't heard of anyone, I knew that there were people out there who had learned a bunch of languages. Hadn't really heard, I wasn't aware of any of them. I didn't know about language YouTube until like just a few years ago. And I realized, a lot of them, when they were talking about how they did it, they were talking about more or less versions of what I had done. And then I started to also get served videos from Krashen explaining his research. And it's like, okay. So somebody has actually done research that sort of backs up this approach that I had gravitated to just on the strength of the results I was getting. And so there you are. So I was thinking, there's a video that I got in my Rex. I had actually reacted to the original video a while ago. Let me just see if I can find that. I have to go back a little bit to find it. Here we go. This is my reaction to this video by Kanguro English, which is supposedly refuting the input hypothesis, but actually he doesn't understand the input hypothesis. But so Evil D, who we've been watching a fair bit of on stream lately, he also apparently did a react on that. Hey Riveroon, how you doing? And I'm kind of curious, because it's kind of an interesting video. People's reactions will kind of help you gauge what their thinking is. And I'm kind of curious what his thinking is, so I was thinking we would look at him reacting to a video I already reacted to. So I was thinking that's what we're going to do next.
Discord server. You can join us in the pin comment.
Drop the link to this video in chat as well. Gang's all here.
What's up, grinders? So today we're going to do another review.
Oh, I gotta get my chat so I can see it. Project his source.
This time we're looking at the myth of input, how not to learn a language. This one was sent to me via Discord. If you guys don't know, I have a Discord server. You can join us in the pinned comment below.
I have a Discord server too. I think everybody in chat is already in it. And that is also a place where you can send me videos that you'd be interested in my take on. Which I think at least some of you already knew.
Talk everything to do with languages there. We have language channels, random channels, meme channels, shitposting. The whole works happens pretty much there. You are more than welcome to join if you just want to be kept in check on your language learning journey. Now, I was sent this video, and as a tiny bit of research, I always do about 10 seconds of research. I noticed that there was other response videos to this, but by much larger language learning YouTubers who are a lot more important than me, graceful than me, beautiful than me.
I wonder if he saw mine then. Because I did one. I'm not sure. Discord is annoying with this linking thing. I'm realizing, I think the problem is it won't actually allow me to send an invite while the stream is going. Here we go. Now let me just drop that link in here. I believe this should work.
But I figured, you know what, I'm going to come in and take this one on because this was actually released by an Australian. And as you know, there's about 4 people in Australia, so I've never met this guy before, so we're going to do a review.
Anyone who has tried to learn a language knows that there are a million different learning systems and methods out there. And a million...
What's interesting to note about Kanguro, apart from the fact that, I mean, one of the things that, I mean, this is the wild thing about this video, is he's like, oh, all these people who are talking about the hardest to monetize approach to language learning ever are just grifters, they're in it for the money, and he's wearing, like, his branded merch and shit.
For people trying to sell them to you.
Well, he's not wrong about that so far.
But after a while, you will probably notice one idea that everybody seems to believe in.
Yeah, and the reason so many people seem to believe in it is because there's actually solid research behind it.
And that is the importance of input. Sometimes entire learning programs are based only on providing input.
I mean, one thing that's also worth noting about Kanguro, I mean, here's the thing about, you know, people who teach their native language. He's based in Spain, okay? And he doesn't speak Spanish. So that is a useful gauge for the efficacy of his preferred approach right there. Because...
And I guess before we jump into this, the problem is people have a really hard time defining what exactly they mean by input. Now, it sounds like a really obvious term. Well,
I mean, it is a really obvious term. Literally anything can be input. Like the instruction manual for your motherboard can be input. disclaimers on, click wrap disclaimers and EULAs and shit. That can be input. Anything can be input. It's not that it's hard to find examples of it, it's that there is a wealth of it. The complicated thing is that comprehensibility is very much an individual thing. What is comprehensible to me will not necessarily be comprehensible to somebody else. And what is comprehensible is not necessarily optimal. Optimal, as like Krashen and other researchers who've done work in this would define it, also includes the element of being compelling to the learner.
Obviously, input is you watch something, you hear it, therefore it's input. But
Yeah.
even the fact
That literally is all it
you
is.
speak words, when you perform and speak words, you are doing another form of input because you're hearing your own voice come back at you. So,
Yeah, I mean, that is true. That's absolutely true. Like, input, I think what he's getting at here fundamentally is that input is a huge universe. And within that universe, you have to actually find the stuff that's going to be good for, first of all, good for like learners at a particular level, but then good for particular individual learners. Because if the input you find is boring as hell to the people that you're trying to help learn a language with it, that's not going to help. So you're dealing with, a huge universe of potential material, and then you have to narrow it down. Hey, Badger.
realistically, depending on how you want to take the meaning and stretch it, it can cover literally everything you do as
Yeah.
a form of input.
Well, I mean, if it involves hearing language that is being produced, or reading language, then yeah, like literally anything can be input in that sense. That doesn't mean it's optimal input. That doesn't mean it's good language learning input, but it all would fall under it. If it's words strung together in a language, yeah, then it's input.
Because you do it and then you get feedback instantly based on how you did it. So I guess what he's probably talking about here is input in the sense of just listening to content, not input as in instant feedback to your own.
Well, yeah, except that feedback, actually, I mean, one of the things that the research has shown is that feedback's kind of useless. That error correction does not actually result in people making fewer errors. And that the importance of it is much lower than people have, because people had this idea for the longest time that there was such a thing as fossilization, where if you started, if your students started making a mistake, they would just, and you didn't immediately annoy the shit out of them with corrections, then they would just be doing it forever and ever, and that's just not how any of it works.
Voice to basically the reactions of people around you, stuff like that.
And on the idea that input is the only thing you need to learn a language.
Well, that depends on how you define learn a language. It's more accurate to say that any effective way of learning a language is going to include a very strong dose of just exposing yourself to optimal input.
The main reason this...
If you want an example of a system that talks about basically only input to learn a language, like a good example, I would say is Dreaming Spanish. Although, technically, based on this, it doesn't quite just use that, because later on they do bring in speech, obviously, because eventually you're going to want to speak the language, but it is a vastly majority input-only system.
Yeah, and actually a really good one, I would say.
As in, you just listen and watch content.
idea is so powerful is due to the influence of...
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Well, I would be interested in your review of Dreaming Spanish Premium. I didn't even know they had a premium. I had looked at Dreaming Spanish for this channel, and it looked pretty legit to me. I mean, the thing is, not everything that people are, like, trying to take your money for is what I would call a grift. Like, there is a lot of grifting on the internet. I'm sure people may have actually noticed that. But, I mean, if you're, like, taking, if you're taking people's money for just some crap, some crap that they could easily find on their own and isn't necessarily going to help them with what they're trying to do, then you're getting into grift territory. But, if you've got, like, a well thought out thing that actually is helpful, that is actually capable of doing the thing that it says it's going to do, then I would not call that a grift. Like, if you give, like, for example, a thing I've thought about offering as sort of a paid service in sort of language learning is a thing where I would essentially do sort of an extended interview with a person who's trying to learn a language to get an idea of the kind of things that might be optimal input for them, and help create sort of a collection of stuff that would be the exact kind of right materials for them in their target language or something like that.
One man, Stephen Krashen, who is often viewed as a legendary figure in the world of language learning.
Well, yes, because there's 40 years of extremely productive research, and it's not just one guy, it's worth noting. There are lots of other language acquisition researchers who've also reproduced his results.
This is an interesting thing for me. A lot of people, they will look up to other people and they'll always refer back to them and, this person, he said this and, he's done these studies and stuff. I'm the type of person where I don't give a shit who you are. If it doesn't seem logical to me or it's not reflected in my experiences in teaching, yes, I've taught for like 10 years at one point, teaching English, teaching every type of person you could imagine. I also taught Esperanto for many, many years. So if it's not reflected in my actual experiences where I've tried and tested these systems, I don't care what you say, I'm just going to call it out.
He proposed the input hypothesis.
And the first thing you have to know, and it will be interesting to see if how well Evil D passes this test. The thing to know about Kanguro is he doesn't understand the input hypothesis. I mean, if he understands it, he's misrepresenting it, but I get the impression he doesn't actually know.
Back in the 1970s, and his ideas have been enormously popular, and
that is a strange thing to say, because actually it has been very difficult to get most mainstream language teaching to engage with this research. Like, even now, it is actually, there are tons of empirically totally unsound teaching methods out there, and people make a lot of money selling them to schools and universities, and sometimes they have fucking branded merch that they wear in their videos where they accuse other people of grifting.
Very influential on the world of language learning during the last 50 years.
I mean, the input hypothesis hasn't been around for 50 years.
And in 2021, you will still find him repeating his now famous mantra that we acquire language in only one way.
I will give it to this guy. He's a very good speaker. He's not using any filler words and he's really enunciating his words quite well, which is actually quite rare to see among YouTubers.
When we understand it. Here is Krashen in his own words.
The core contribution, I think, is that we acquire language in only one way.
See, and the thing about this here already is we're not talking about a guy who just makes YouTube videos. We're talking about a guy who has carried out a body of empirical, peer-reviewed research. If you're going to refute that research, you need to engage with that rather than him summing it up for a popular audience.
When we understand it. Most people call that comprehensible input. We don't acquire language when we speak. We don't acquire language when we study it. We don't acquire language when we memorize lists of verbs, etc., etc.
Now, here is something that he said that logically just does not fit for me. Because he said, we learn via input, we don't learn via speech. But
no, he doesn't say learn, he says acquire, and that is an important difference. Because this is a technical term. Acquisition refers to actually something that goes on in the brain. Essentially,
I mean, you can sort of visualize it as creating a space in the shape of this target language. He's talking about an internal mental process that makes all of the other things you do with it, makes language production possible.
Speech is a form of input.
No, yeah, you can define it that way, but that's not how the research defines it. If you're going to address the research, you have to take it on its own terms.
If you ask any actor, and
I mean, actually, you would talk about, within this context, the learner speaking would be an example of language production, not input.
again, I did acting for many years before I became a programmer. We learn the vast majority of our monologues by speaking them over and over. We may use different methods along the way.
Yeah, but this is not language acquisition. That, I mean, you're talking about memorization there to a great extent. I mean, there's more to acting than memorizing lines, of course, but it's not the same thing because the lines that you are learning, they're in a language you've already acquired.
To like speed up that process, such as memory palaces and hooks and all this type of stuff. But at the end of the day, we learn them by talking them. Now, some actors will listen to the monologue, you know, on an audio recording and then later on practice it, but that's not what the vast majority of actors do.
Yeah, I mean, see, this is the problem with not engaging with the research, with like critiquing research. Yeah, critiquing research that you haven't actually engaged with, because one of the main points, one of the main postulates of this entire hypothesis, on which again about 40 years, not 50, of research has been built and has actually confirmed, is that, I mean, language acquisition is actually a different thing. There is, I mean, in linguistics, there is what is called the language acquisition device, which is a term that is used to describe whatever aspects of the brain are involved in the process of language acquisition. We know that they exist, we have a pretty good idea of what some of them are, but for the purposes of linguistics, you just need to know that that thing is there, and that it has this process. And one of the main points in all of this, within linguistics and within the specific area of language acquisition, is that the acquisition of language is not the same thing as learning other things.
So here we're getting input via speaking, and that's improving our monologue. Now you might want to debate me and say, well, that's not what we mean by language learning, but learning a monologue is...
Well, it's not, I mean, he very specifically uses acquisition.
Just learning a string of words and sentences together. And realistically, when you're learning a language, you're starting to learn how these things are stringed together.
We don't acquire language when we get corrected. All those things.
Yeah, I mean, and what he's saying, he's not just saying this stuff. There is empirical research on this, on what works and what doesn't work. And there's no evidence that being explicitly corrected actually improved anyone's grammar.
See, I disagree with that as well. Because if you use Anki, you are getting corrected and you learn language via doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no evidence that you do, though, is the point. You pay a lot of money for something that tells you you're learning a language, but all you're doing is memorization. It does not actually... There's no evidence that that actually is useful. If you're doing Anki and you don't have a source of comprehensible input that you're also regularly using, you're not going to get it, which is another way, you're not going to get anything out of it, which is another way of saying that what's actually helping there, even if you're using Anki cards or whatever, is the input, not the Anki cards.
So I don't disagree with the concept that we learn via input, but it depends what you mean by input. And here...
And it would be really good if people who were having these takes would actually engage at least a little bit with the actual research.
Is now counting out those other things that I also include as input.
Grammar, vocabulary are the result of getting comprehensible input.
And again, if you're speaking those things and you know what they mean, then that is comprehensible and it is a form of input.
Yeah, but that's not. Again, okay, this is actually really annoying. Like, this is like, I mean, if you're going to address, engage with scientific work, you do have to actually know what the terms mean within the work and address it on its own terms. That is one of the most annoying things, when you have people who are not actually familiar with the scientific work, who will, or like even like sort of a philosophical tendency. It's if you're going to actually do a critique, you have to actually be using the terms in a way that maps to the way that the terms are being used in the particular area of science or philosophical tendency or whatever. Otherwise, you're just talking past it.
First output it, then you hear yourself as you output it.
It sounds great, right? No speaking, no study, just input. It's the dream of any language learner. There's just
Okay, I can see already what his gripe is with what was just said then.
one little problem.
I mean, his gripe is that he literally does not understand. Either he doesn't understand it, or he's pretending not to understand it.
With the input hypothesis. It's total.
Okay, I hope he's got something to back that up with.
Spoiler alert, he doesn't. He literally, his examples are things that he says are things that the input hypothesis cannot account for, are literally things that are part of the input hypothesis, which he would know if he bothered to fucking engage with it at all.
Now, I know this is dangerous ground, because I am talking about a person that is highly respected.
Oh, see, I mean, and this is great. This is a classic grifter move. I mean, you see this in a lot of areas where somebody who is going to give you the biggest bullshit take ever, what they will do is instead position themselves as this bold truth teller. They're slaughtering a sacred cow or something like that. They're a bold iconoclast. They're not speaking, they're not like failing to comprehend an extensive area of research and misrepresenting it. They are pulling back the curtain. Yeah, I know. I mean, this is such bullshit right now already.
And his ideas are the foundation of a lot of language learning programs.
Yeah, well, because it's not just his ideas. This is already, I mean, again, I am perfectly willing to be charitable and assume that he just doesn't know anything about this. Because that is the charitable assumption. The uncharitable assumption is that he does know about it, in which case he's being very dishonest. But it's not just Krashen's ideas. There is literal research. There is peer-reviewed research you can actually look at. And if you're going to critique, somebody, decades of scientific work, not just of one person either, lots of people, then you need to engage with that scientific work, not just a, minute and a half YouTube clip.
But I truly believe...
Now, obviously, at the end of the day, you want to trial things. It doesn't matter how respected someone is. Don't just believe it because that's what's said. Trial it out. Now...
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're going to do that, you need to engage with more than, just what somebody's saying when they're summing up their work on a YouTube clip. Stephen Krashen is not a YouTuber. He's a researcher, and he's not the only one who's getting these results.
Obviously, when we talk about science in general, you can't trial everything out. We have to, have some leeway in our belief systems. But for something like language learning, which is going to take a very long time, a big portion of your life, definitely trial out different things.
Yeah, but the thing is, again, that is misunderstanding. See, that is misunderstanding input as method. Because input is not a method. It is an ingredient. It is a factor. It's not that using input is just the method. That is a common misconception. The issue is that input is a key factor, and if it's not there, you will not get the result. If it is there, no matter what else you're doing, you are probably going to get the result. And that is what all this research shows. That it is a key factor, engaging with the comprehensible input. And that is something, again, being charitable, Kanguro doesn't know anything about this, and so he does not make that distinction.
In the principle of error correction, created by the great sociolinguist William Labov, who said that a person who becomes aware...
Oh god, here we go, the bold truth teller shit. This is so grifty.
...of an idea...
I'm not saying that Labov is a grifter, I'm saying that he's doing this thing. I have an obligation to talk about these errors to the widest possible audience. And in his case, what he's doing just happens to dovetail very nicely with his financial interests, since he uses an empirically invalidated approach to language teaching.
Important consequences, that has errors, has an obligation to talk about those errors with the widest possible audience.
I don't agree with the obligation part right now, and I'm not sure exactly how this is related to language learning unless he's trying to state that he sees that there is an error within belief systems around language learning, and therefore he is obligated to talk.
Yes, and of course the error that he sees is that people are not believing so much in the approach that he makes money off of.
And because I think that the input hypothesis has errors and negatively affects millions of people trying to learn a language, I have an obligation to talk about it.
Okay, I should have just let him finish his sentence.
Yeah, I mean, this is the griftiest shit ever. And it's really something that, I have to say, Evil D has been doing these things where it's like, is this person a fraud or something like that? And this isn't setting his grift meter, this isn't like burying the needle of the fraudometer that somebody is using, somebody's talking this way, doing this sort of positioning and stuff like that. I have to say, you missed it.
So, let's get specific. What exactly is the problem with the input hypothesis? The first problem is that the hypothesis can immediately be shown to be false.
Yeah, exactly, Hogsnout. Contrarian YouTubers trying to debunk serious academics will always be so embarrassing. And I mean, I'm getting the feeling, just from listening to both of them talk, that neither of them have engaged with this work. They've watched YouTube videos. That is not how you engage with scientific work.
By a specific but very common group of people called receptive bilinguals.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was talking about as an example of something that you do, that he shows either that he does not understand what he's talking about, or that he's deliberately misrepresenting it.
They are people who have a highly proficient understanding of language, but they cannot speak or write it.
Yeah, this is something, this is addressed by the input hypothesis, because one of the key findings in this research is that people in all languages, whether it's their first language or any additional language, have what's called a silent period, where they are simply being receptive. Now, one of the challenges, particularly in an environment where the language that you're learning is not spoken everywhere, where you do not have regular occasion to use it, is getting out of the silent period. That transition requires some work. But The thing is, that silent period is always there, and some people never get out of it. So, like, what he's talking about is not something that this theory, this scientific work, fails to account for. He's talking about something that is explicitly addressed in the findings of the work that he hasn't read.
Okay, I understand what he's getting at now.
This situation is really common among the children of immigrants.
Yes, and the reason it's common among them is that on the one hand, they have actually gotten a lot of input in the language, so they do have this internal account. They have acquired the language to a certain level of passive knowledge of it, but they have not acquired it necessarily beyond that. So they will have a certain level of understanding, but they haven't actually, but they're in their silent period and they haven't moved beyond it because they don't have occasion to do as much speaking as they would need to. I mean, this is basic stuff.
The family moves to a new country and the parents continue to speak the language of the old country.
See, he hasn't got into it yet. But my issues with this type of belief system where all you need is input and nothing else is the fact that people...
Which, I mean, this is itself not an understanding of what's going on. It is not an understanding of the theory, and actually degrading this scientific research to a belief system, I mean, that's not a great move, but it is not that all you need is this and nothing else. It is that it is the necessary factor in the process. I mean, if I say that you need that a fire will only occur if there is sufficient oxygen available to make the fire happen, I'm not saying that oxygen is all you need. I'm saying that without the oxygen, it doesn't fucking matter what else you've got set up there. You might have a perfect setup. The oxygen, but without the oxygen, you're not going to have a fire.
We'll take this, like what he's saying, so what the belief system is, you need input in order to learn a language, is true. But output is just as crucial as input if you want to be able to utilize that language. Because even little children, we're talking babies, they don't just sit there silently, passively listening.
Actually, for a while they do, though. For a while they are not making concerted attempts at making language sounds. I mean, this is, again, a key part of the research. There is this silent receptive period. People start talking at different ages. I actually started talking fairly late, is my understanding of it. I don't really have a particular recollection. But the thing is that there is a period where children start talking, and there's a period before it. And the thing is, we have that in our acquisition of subsequent languages as well.
No. As soon as they can form the most basic of sounds, they try to communicate. And then they get corrected via, their environment.
Yeah, that's not how that works. Like, what, who the fuck is, like, okay, so you have, like, a, 1 month-old baby makes some sort of random sound. What kind of fucked up parents are correcting them?
By the reactions of their peers, the reactions of their parents, just by the fact that they're not understood, they get corrections, and then they work those corrections into what they've learned about this language. Now, there have been plenty of studies that show even before a baby is able to physically make sounds, it's already trying to communicate.
Yes, but that's not the same thing as using language. Language and communications are not the same thing. In fact, there's a lot of work indicating that communication is kind of an epiphenomenon of language. Most of what we do with the language is non-communicative because we use it in our heads to think. But the thing is, again, there is a period of there is a period before language production.
So the idea that we should just wait until we're already highly proficient in listening to a language before we speak would be the equivalent of a kid waiting until, a couple of years old before they start speaking.
That is literally what happens, though. That is literally what happens. They literally, okay, let me see. Average age children start speaking. I would assume probably 2 to 3. First words between 10 and 14 months. Okay, between 12 and 18 months of age. Okay, so yeah, literally, this is what happens, what he just said. That is literally how it works.
Most parents would be concerned at that stage.
But the children will adopt the language of the new country.
Yes, for one thing, they're getting way more input in that language. For another thing, there is, as Hogsnow pointed out, a lot of cultural pressure to use that language. Because it doesn't matter if you are hearing some Lao at home from your parents. If, when you get out the door, you need to be speaking Italian in order to make yourself understood, well, which one is going to be the one that you become the most proficient in? The minute you get out of the door of your house, everybody's speaking to you in Italian, and in order to make yourself understood, you have to talk back to them in Italian, and when you turn the TV on, it's stuff in Italian, well, that is going to be the one that you more quickly negotiate the silent period in.
And in that situation, it's common that the children will be able to perfectly understand the language of their parents, but will have a varying ability to express themselves.
Yeah, the wild thing about this, and he says this in such a condescending, way. Like he is bringing the truths from on high, but what he's actually doing is pointing out a basic finding of input-related language acquisition research.
Now, you cannot argue that these children are not receiving comprehensible input. And not only is it comprehensible, but it is meaningful.
What? That doesn't even make sense. I was so busy dealing with the other bullshit that he says in this video that I didn't even notice this nonsense. How is it going to be comprehensible if it's not meaningful? What are you comprehending if it has no meaning?
It is input from their own parents.
I will say there's one caveat.
And one other thing to note is that actually caregivers' speech children are not primarily acquiring language through caregivers speaking to them. They're acquiring it more from the people around them speaking to each other.
To this. And that is that children and adults alike, if they don't find the use for the thing that they're trying to learn, then they're not going to learn it. So for most children, it's not because they're not getting enough input and it's comprehensible. It's just due to the fact that they don't see a need for what they're hearing and listening to, and therefore they just filter it out and never actually learn it. So a child who learns their first native language, it's obvious why they learn that to fluency, because they literally have to. They cannot survive without that language.
Yeah, and the thing is, in a situation where they're getting input in 2 languages, and one of them is the language that they're going to encounter in school and in the neighborhood and on TV and everything like that, it's not surprising that they might actually find that they're more able to produce language in that language than in the other one.
So that becomes the most crucial thing in their life. So when you learn a language, if you don't feel like this language that you're learning is crucial enough to pay attention, then you're not going to learn it, or at least you're not going to learn it well.
About that.
And it's worth noting, again, there we're talking about another thing that is literally just a finding of the research they're both talking about. This is when we talk about optimal input, which is the terminology the researchers in the field are using now. Part of it is the term compelling. You actually have to care about it. If you don't give a shit about it, you're not going to be able to pay attention to it. And if you're not paying attention to it, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Own life. Yet, some of these children cannot speak or write the language of their parents.
And I've actually got first-hand experience with this. So I've had to tutor multiple Chinese families with their kids as they live here in Australia. And inside the house, they speak Chinese perfectly fine. And then outside, they avoid making English friends just because they want to speak Chinese with everyone that they know. For them, even though they live in an English country, all the social media is in Chinese.
Well, yeah, so this is actually an example. This is a good counterexample. The reason they have acquired Chinese so well is because they are systematically exposing themselves to Chinese input quite beyond what you would get on average living in Australia. I mean, this is actually...
Their friends that they've made now are in Chinese because there's a very big Chinese community here. They even go to schools where the teachers can speak Chinese. Their parents, family members, their community is all Chinese. And therefore, they actually have a very hard time finding a use for English. Now, eventually, they realize they're going to need this language. But they actually actively resist trying to learn this language. I've had these students actively resist, like, oh, do we have to do this?
Yeah, because it's like, it's not compelling. And what they've acquired because, again, they're surrounded by optimal, compelling, comprehensible input from all angles. I mean, the people that Kanguro is talking about, they're often in situations where they don't have much use for their parents' language outside of the home.
Do we have to, like, use English type of thing? It's actually quite strange because you're in a country where you would think they would definitely need to learn English.
And this is just one.
And yet there are clearly communities within that country where they don't. I mean...
An example of asymmetrical bilingualism. In fact, in general, bilingualism is misunderstood.
Including by Kanguro, who is monolingual, it's worth noting. I mean, the worst language acquisition takes come from people whose only experience is teaching their native language. Especially if it's a native language where people are already bombarded with comprehensible input. Because English, I mean, you can't avoid English. Even if you're in a place where most people don't really speak it, you can't avoid it because it's in the popular music. It's in, like, it ends up, like, sort of seeping into the local language. It's all over the place.
It is extremely, extremely rare that people who speak 2 or more languages will have equal abilities in all of them. And even...
Well, of course, you're never going to have equal abilities in every language because you're going to use every language for a different scenario. Unless you're using it...
Well, I mean, equal and the same aren't necessarily the same thing, though.
Exact same scenario, with the exact same type of people, talking about the exact same things. You're literally not going to have, like, an equal amount in the language. And
yeah, I mean, he's totally right there. I mean, you're probably going to have different topics and contexts in which you're using one language over another. Like, there are things that I actually find difficult talking about in English, because I only really have occasion to speak about them in German or Spanish.
You can even measure this if you wanted to anyway.
Even though this is a well-known fact, and also totally natural, this creates a great deal of shame for some people who want to honor their parents and honor their culture through language.
This is interesting. I'm starting to look at this guy through the eyes of a teacher. Now, I say that because most, like, polyglot YouTubers and stuff online, you know, they talk about languages, and by the way, I don't claim to be a polyglot. most of these guys, they look at it from the perspective of like someone who has learnt languages, for pleasure, maybe for business or something like that.
Yeah, it is actually the perspective that actually matters. And the thing is that Kanguro has no experience learning a language. I mean, not successfully anyway. Like, he speaks Spanish to sort of a low A1 level despite being in a Spanish-speaking environment. The learner's perspective is precisely what is missing amongst most teachers, particularly teachers of English, which is precisely why they fall for a lot of empirically debunked approaches to language pedagogy.
As opposed to having to actually teach a language, which is something that I've had to do for many, many years before I transitioned out of that.
But the fact that people do not have equal abilities in all their languages is not surprising to me.
Well, it's not surprising to anyone. What's the flex here? Like, does he think that language acquisition research would be shocked that people don't have equal proficiency in all their languages? Like, what's his point here?
At all. Because
I don't think anyone would find that surprising.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, is there someone out there who's claiming that? Like, I don't know where he's going with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, where he's going with this is that he's misrepresenting language acquisition research.
I know something that everyone knows if they take a moment to reflect.
Yeah, this is totally irrelevant.
You get good at what you practice. And
That is common sense.
that's why I have an obligation to talk about
An obligation? Shut the fuck up. You have a financial interest. That's what it's called. Because the thing is, what he's misrepresenting here happens to be a fairly difficult to monetize thing. Because once you realize, once you realize that the key ingredient is comprehensible, compelling input in your target language, the thing about that is you can find that everywhere for free on the internet. It is extremely difficult to monetize empirically validated ways of doing this because a lot of the stuff that you need, a lot of the key ingredients are just things people can find on their own for free.
This obsession with input is so dangerous.
Okay.
It's dangerous. See, he's trying to save people. And the way you save yourself from the dangers of input is by paying him money.
I get the feeling that the direction that this is heading is that he's targeting those groups specifically that think all you need is input for
No, he really isn't, though.
for like a very, very, very long time. And I understand that. Like, it is stupid to think that you're going to make fast progress in a language by just sitting there and getting input.
Yeah, except those are two separate things. The people who, make claims about how fast, about learning fast, and the people who are following the work that has been done in language acquisition, though that is not a Venn diagram with a whole lot of overlap, because what language acquisition research counsels is patience. It is not, what it actually says is this idea that you can just sort of zip through a whole language is nonsense, because it takes time for your brain to digest and acquire all of that input and start to get to the point where it can actually produce. Those are two very separate groups.
Now, again, at the end of the day, it depends what you want to do with the language. If all you care about is watching movies and you don't want to speak the language, then yeah, great. But from what I can see here, he's talking at this as the perspective of a teacher with the students, and obviously the students want to learn and possibly, most likely, speak the language.
Because
Yeah, and they made the mistake of coming to him.
it doesn't explain the full story. And I think mainly it's a problem of definitions.
Specifically, it's a problem of him misrepresenting the terms that he's using and misrepresenting the actual findings of the research. Though I should be charitable and say he just doesn't know anything about this stuff. I don't want to accuse him of intentional dishonesty about it when you could get this exact video from somebody who's just ignorant.
Okay, I'm going to let him explain this in a second, but this is what my thoughts on this are. So Krashen's ideas are correct. However, is either he doesn't know how to enunciate his ideas correctly.
Fucking hell. He doesn't enunciate he's a scientist. He doesn't enunciate his ideas in YouTube videos. He does studies and puts them in peer-reviewed journals. If you want to hear him enunciating his ideas, you gotta read that stuff. That's what you engage with. The YouTube video is him like fucking smoothing over all the complicated stuff to give the popularized version of his work. It isn't even hard. You can get all of his work for free, by the way. You go to his website. He does not like paywalling science. So all of his papers are available for free. You can read them.
Because what he said earlier about input and, speaking not being a form of input is just completely incorrect.
No. Speaking is not a form of input within this context. Speaking is output within this context. Darauf habe ich schon vor mehreren Monaten reagiert.
Like, that is obvious to anyone. When you do something, it is output, but then it becomes a form of input. I feel like that is completely obvious to anyone. So,
yeah, but again, this is not engaging with the research on its own terms. In fact, it's not engaging with the research. He's engaging with a soundbite here. And that is a real problem. Because we're not talking, again, Stephen Krashen is not a YouTuber. He's a researcher who has spoken on things that have spoken at talks and things that have ended up on YouTube or were made for YouTube. Nothing wrong with that. I'm doing it right now. But the thing is, if you're going to address somebody's scientific work and critique it, you got to read the work, not the fucking not just use the soundbite.
What's probably happened is people have taken this idea that input only means listening, and they've run with it. Now, I don't know if that's what Krashen himself actually believes, but based on that one clip...
Listening is precisely how we get to our, get to the point of being able to speak at all in our L1, in our first language. We are, for the first, 14 to 18 months, and sometimes longer, of our lives, listening to all that is being said around us and trying to sort of connect that to things that we recognize in the world. And eventually we get to the point where we've got enough of those connections that we can start to make first halting attempts at linguistic communication. And then it goes from there. I mean, literally there is a period where the passive aspect is key. And the word passive is kind of misleading here. Because on the one hand, it's passive in the sense that you're not producing anything back. But the engagement with it is not passive. You have to actually be engaging and paying attention to it. And that's why it's important for it to be interesting.
Which was just there. I don't know how far out of context that was taken. But just that one...
extremely far. There's 40 years of context of peer-reviewed studies he's done, and not just him.
Clip there means, in Krashen's eyes, speaking is not a form of input, which to me, it most definitely is. And error correction, I don't know why he said that's not going to help you learn a language.
Oh, well, he said that because he studied this shit. Actually, again... scientific work, fucking read it if you're going to critique it. They've done studies on whether explicit error correction actually results in people making the errors less. It doesn't. It literally doesn't.
Of course error correction helps you learn a language.
It doesn't, though. Literally, empirically, it doesn't. The reason he says that is because there have been lots and lots of studies on this. There have been studies on different ways of doing error correction.
There have also been studies on the need for explicit error correction, empirically validating this nonsense concept of fossilization, which turns out to be a nonsense concept. Like, the reason he says this, see, this is so unfortunate. And this is so unnecessary. Like, if you're going to actually react, you're going to actually talk about somebody's scientific work, engage with it, please. He makes it available for free. You don't even need a JSTOR account. You go to his website. I mean, that's not all of the work. That's just the stuff that he's authored, and there are lots of other people who have authored it. And if you want to talk about, like, input-based teaching methods, I mean, he talks about some examples, some very well-known examples, like TPRS, Teaching Proficiency Through Reading and Storytelling, is an example of it, but it's not the only one by any means. And you could look at that, because, again, input is not a method, it's an ingredient.
Why would we go to school at all if we didn't need some form of error correction?
Because, again, this is also a basic thing, a basic linguistic concept. Language acquisition and language is different. It is not the same as learning to tie your shoes or learning multiplication or fucking assigning proton spectrums. It engages different parts of your brain in different ways. It's not the same thing. I mean, again, it's really unfortunate here. And, I mean, this is an unfortunate tendency in, like, YouTube, that people have to have hot takes about things and don't necessarily actually look into what the thing is that they're going to have the hot take about. Because all of this is avoidable. These are unnecessary errors. And see, when I'm doing this is a form of error correction here. But I'm not trying to correct a grammatical error. I'm not correcting somebody's language acquisition process. I'm correcting their faulty engagement with scientific work.
Now, I know some people are going to say, well, that's because there's a kind of linguistic imperialism that's happening where we've set a standard for one language and now we want to pull everyone up to that.
No, that is not, I mean, yes, that is also a thing that's going on. I mean, I don't quite understand what he's talking about, but yeah, linguistic imperialism is a thing. But that's not the issue. And again, like, God, you gotta engage with the scientific work if you're gonna talk about it like this.
Even though, there's many different ways to use a language. And I understand that perspective completely. However, that still does not negate the fact that error correction is highly important.
No, what negates that is empirical work on whether it actually has any beneficial effect, and it doesn't. Like, I mean, this is a big part of the problem, particularly in English-speaking countries, that people teach languages without ever seriously engaging with this stuff. And when you know something about the studies that form the empirical basis for a lot of the methods that are commonly used in schools and universities and stuff, what you find is if you actually look at it, it's an absolute joke. I mean, we're talking tiny study sizes. The standard for proficiency is often memorization of a few phrases. Sometimes it's a made-up language, and it's complete garbage. It is, it takes 5 minutes to see what the problem with this stuff is. But the thing is, most people are just learning this stuff, and it's the way that it was done to them in school, so they think, oh, well, then it's got to just work like this, and it's how other things are taught, so it's just got to work like this, and there's no engagement with the actual science.
To improving your language. That's literally what Anki does.
Yeah, I mean, and that's literally an example of why Anki is crap, actually. Anki wa unko da. Anki wa unko.
Tool used for error correction. Now, teachers are literally there as a form of error correction, and when you listen to something...
Teachers are not there as a form of error correction. Like, not necessarily. And in the world, in language acquisition, language teachers are there
I mean, to the extent that they're useful, let's say, they're there as guides for your engagement with the input that they're using. I mean, and if you want to talk about this, like, engage with some actual methods. Like, he's talking about this very broadly, like, Kanguro is talking very broadly in the abstract about this stuff. And then also, again, being charitable, not knowing anything about it. But, I mean, this would be a much more sensible discussion to have when you're looking at an actual teaching method based on it. And you can look at that. Yeah, it exists. Like, I mean, like TPRS being one of the most prominent examples. You can look at how those classes are taught. They're not correcting stuff. They are not doing any of the, they're not, like, drilling grammar and stuff, because there's no empirical evidence that that stuff is useful.
If you say something and the person repeats it back to you corrected, you're getting error correction.
Actually, this is literally, it's interesting. See, when you talk about that, there's also, not only has there been studies about, like, error correction generally and its utility or lack thereof, there have been studies of different types of error correction, and the one he immediately goes to is the one that is actually the least effective amongst those already ineffective methods.
You're aware of it or not, and you may absorb that slowly over time. In fact, it is completely stupid to think that error correction plays no part in this.
Well, then why don't the studies bear it out? See, this is this is a thing, people who have been taught a particular way of doing things, who, like, fancy themselves an authority on that thing as a result, because, they're in a position of teaching or something like that, they convince them that what they're doing, they convince themselves that what they're doing is necessary and helpful. And so they're very resistant to any evidence that it's neither of those things. Like, if you're going to defend error correction, at least defend it against the evidence that it's useless. Because that evidence is in the form of peer-reviewed science.
Because if we did not get error correction, we would not learn at all.
First, let's ask two vital questions. One, what does it mean to acquire a language?
Yeah, I mean, it would be good to actually engage with the terminology used in the scientific work that you're misrepresenting.
And two, what do you want?
I have one beef with the term acquire a language, because what does it mean? You just...
Well, I mean, again, this is not something you have to speculate about. Go look at the fucking scientific work. Here, let me find. I'm sure if I go, let's see, Krashen language acquisition research, we'll find his definition. Okay, here we go. Principles and practice. Acquisition. I'm gonna find... Let's see. I'm finding his definition because, again, this guy, he's a scientist. He's written books on this stuff. Okay. Relation... I'm just trying to find him defining it. I'm sure he has defined it. Because you have to define these things at some point.
Okay, here we go. The acquisition... Okay, let me just drop this link for everybody into chat. This is Krashen's website, and you can find all his fucking scientific work right there for free. Hello, Reese. Okay, is that K? That's K... Wang? Or Kaok? I'm not sure. That could be Chinese, that could be Korean, that could be Japanese, Hanja, Kanji. Which reading am I looking for? Okay, the page number for this is page 17. And let me just, I'm going to stick this up on screen so we can all look at it, because this is important and it is not a mystery what these things mean. We don't need to speculate on what the researchers mean when they talk about this stuff. Okay. The acquisition-learning distinction. The acquisition-learning distinction is perhaps the most fundamental of all the hypotheses to be presented here. It states that adults have two distinct and independent ways of developing competence in a second language. The first way is language acquisition, a process similar, if not identical, to the way children develop ability in their first language. Language acquisition is a subconscious process. Language acquirers are not usually aware of the fact that they are acquiring language, but are only aware of the fact that they are using the language for communication. The result of language acquisition, acquired competence, is also subconscious. We are generally not consciously aware of the rules of the languages we have acquired. Instead, we have a feel for correctness. Grammatical sentences sound right or feel right, and errors feel wrong, even if we do not consciously know what rule was violated. And that is so important, because a huge amount of linguistics is dedicated to making... See, the number of rules you learn in your grammar class in whatever language, whether, you know, your English class if you're in an English-speaking country, your French class if you're in a French-speaking country, the rules that they will teach you are a tiny fraction of the number of rules and parameters and principles that make up how a language works. Linguists are not interested in that, are not so much interested in those surface level rules that you're taught in school. What they're interested in is all the other stuff that we never fuck up, even though nobody ever taught us not to, even though we're unaware that it's a rule at all. We just do it because we acquired it and we don't even understand why. And it's the stuff, like if you've ever taught a language or encountered somebody who's learning your language, sometimes they will ask you questions and they blow your mind. They blow your mind because you had no idea that that was a thing. You never thought about it in your entire life until somebody who is a second or third language learner comes up to you and is like, wait, why do you always order your adjectives like that? And it's like, wait, what? Order my adjectives? I've never ordered my adjectives in my life. But you always do it this way. Time, manner, size, location. Why are you always doing it that way? I didn't know I was fucking doing that. Thank you. Now I'm going to be thinking about this the rest of my life. Yeah, exactly. Atta, thank you. Bringing the example. Saving me from having to think of one. Other ways of describing acquisition include implicit learning, informal learning, and natural learning. In non-technical language, acquisition is picking up a language. The second way to develop competence in a second language is by language learning. We will use the term learning henceforth to refer to conscious knowledge of a second language, knowing the rules, being aware of them, and being able to talk about them. In non-technical terms, learning is knowing about a language. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, they're talking, but they're reacting to this distillation of the theory. That's very true, Reese. I agree with you entirely. But the thing is, if you're going, but they're doing it as if they're reacting to the theory. And
Kanguro in particular does not know shit about the theory. He's not, I mean, and in fact, I don't know whether he doesn't, whether he knows, is as ignorant as he presents himself, or whether he's deliberately misrepresenting and misreading his viewers. But, I mean, if you're going to talk about, you know, somebody's scientific work, look at the work. Like, I mean, it was not hard for me to find how Stephen, I've not read this book of his. I ought to read this book. I think it would be good for me to read this book, and I'm now going to. I'm going to download it, because he makes this shit available for free. But if you're going to, like, have a serious discussion about these things, you gotta actually look for how these terms are being used in the discourse, in the area of research and everything, and then stick to that, to address them on their own terms. He has a whole chapter here, starting at page 17 of this book, which is available for free in PDF, explaining what is meant by acquisition. We don't need to speculate about it. I'm going to drop this link in chat again for any newcomers who didn't see it. But, I mean, Krashen has all of his scientific work for free on his website. You can find the lot. So, here's the book. Here is, like, one of his major works that also explains the nature of what it is, what it means when we talk about acquiring a language. And here is my Discord link, because it is time for me to start giving thought to dinners and eating them, and I think I'm going to do that now. But I will be back tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and maybe we'll continue on with this. We'll play some GeoGuessr, and we'll continue on looking at this video, because I think it's an important point that I'm making here. And his writing, Krashen's writing, is very accessible. Check out the PDF. Check out his work. It's interesting stuff. I'm gonna probably read. I'm gonna be reading this for like the next few days, I think, because it's there and it's interesting. So we'll come back to this. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and join the Discord. We can keep in touch, and you can find other videos for me to react to and tell me about them, and I will probably react to them at some point. May take